Welcome into the Denver Sports Podcast, and today we're talking championships. Following up from the Super Bowl, we get to talk about who's next. Which Colorado sports team is the closest to winning a championship of their own? We're going to get into that and a lot more coming up next on the Denver Sports Podcast. What is up? What is up, everyone? Welcome in. We are live from Studio B here in the DNVR bar. Upstairs in the DNVR bar, Christian Saez, Dre hanging out with me. We're celebrating a Chiefs disastrous loss on this podcast here because I think we're all in agreement that, like, this is just, you know, anytime you can see the Chiefs not only lose in the Super Bowl, but lose in dramatic fashion.
So glorious.
It is glorious. We were reveling in that. I actually was watching the Super Bowl with a buddy of mine who was a Giants fan. Felt a little bad for him and getting to see, Saquon.
Yeah.
Although Saquon had a relatively abysmal game.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Still a Super Bowl champion, and nonetheless, it was an interesting Super Bowl. We'll talk about the Super Bowl later in the show, but I want to use the Super Bowl as a springboard into the real topic of discussion today, and that is the conversation of who's next. Which Colorado sports team is closest to winning a championship? Now, I'm not talking about like the date of which,
but
hockey
that could be a key factor.
It could be a
key factor.
I mean, there's a lot of factors here, and I actually think this is a really good discussion because we have some teams not named the Rockies that are very much in the conversation of winning a championship this year. I mean, you could definitely make the argument for both the Avs and the Nuggets, which we're going to do here in just a few moments, but it's more about figuring out like who is closest to that, who still has some work to do, who needs to make some moves throughout the rest of this season, whether it be at the trade deadline for the Avs or whether it be, in signing free agents, like whatever that looks like. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of layers to the discussion that we're going to get into.
Many factors at play.
Yeah, and I see a couple people in the chat already saying, the answer is not the Rockies.
Your chat has the Toyota chat's filling up, not the Rockies.
Yep.
That seems like a smart take.
That's fair. I think
it's good to get that one out the way.
If you're gonna put money on a championship for any of the Colorado sports teams, you might not want to bet the mortgage on the Colorado Rockies. Although this is a year that we hopefully have some growth. You can tune into my podcast to watch Rockies coverage stuff coming up on Friday. Though. It's a team that's hoping for some growth. We got some teams though that are very much in the thick of it right now, in your championship window. And I'd say just out of the gates, it's off the top. It's got to be between the Nuggets and the Avs, right? Like the Broncos, we'll make an argument for them here in a little bit, but just straight out of the gate, closest team in sheer terms of talent and execution, it's between the Nuggets and the Avs.
Yeah, 100%. I think the Broncos maybe could factor into that dynasty convo a little more. The Broncos also have the aforementioned Chiefs as a big factor in that. They have a division where Jim Harbaugh was just added and immediately took the Chargers to the playoffs. They've got Tom Brady as an owner for the Raiders and Pete Carroll joining in, and we'll see what they do at quarterback. But that's one of the toughest divisions in all of football. And I think the Broncos could have had an offseason similar to like the Texans last year and kind of be the frisky, hot underdog team that you're projecting going into the season. Like, oh, they could be...
Yeah.
Because of the Russell Wilson trade and the cap situation and all of that, they're probably still a year away from really being in the convo with Nuggets and Avs.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, the tension is rising for Broncos fans. We start to feel it in the air. There's anticipation there. But the Avs and the Nuggets are very much in that championship window. You could make the argument that, like, the Broncos are starting to trend towards a playoff window. You know, I mean, they already were in the playoffs this year. The Avs and Nuggets are in the thick of that. Now, I'll give my take on this right out of the gate. I think if I'm having to choose between this tight race of Avs and Nuggets, I'm going to go with the Avs. And the reason I'm going to go with the Avs and why I think the Avs are closer than the Nuggets to being a championship winning team this year is because I think the Avs have been able to fill the gaps in their roster in more calculated ways than the Nuggets have been able to this year. I mean, the Nuggets, I know there's been a lot of conversations around like what they did or didn't do during the trade deadline. They felt comfortable with the guys that they had. They weren't able to move the pieces that they wanted to move. Like there's all of that going on. The Avs have made, in my opinion, a couple really good moves this year that have fully addressed where they were lacking. You got the Blackwood and Wedgwood deal, you know, Martin Necas. Hope I said that right. Necas, right?
Martin Necas.
Necas, there you go. His deal with Rantanen seems like it's working out right now for the Avs. I feel like the Avs are a complete team right now. The Nuggets are as well, but I just think, I don't know, maybe the Avs have been more active. Maybe that's why I feel more inclined to lean their way.
I think you're right that like a month ago, 2 months ago, it probably skewed more naturally Nuggets.
Yeah, sure.
And with what the Avs have done this season, adding that goalie depth, adding some more high-end talent in between the pipes, and then the Mikko Rantanen trade, that closes the gap. I think there's more unknowns and more like open-ended factors with the Avs to where the West seems wide open.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bet365, one of the sponsors of this here show, they only have 2 teams in the Western Conference with higher odds than the Avs to win the Stanley Cup. One's the Edmonton Oilers. We just saw that Oilers-Avalanche matchup.
Absolutely.
And played out very well. I mean, that's a team where I think Edmonton's more concerned about that playoff series than the Avs are. And then you have the Dallas Stars, who are just barely ahead of the Avs 10-1 versus 11-1. And, you know, Heiskanen, their star defender, is out, and there's some uncertainty there. So you could pitch me on, look, the Avs with the moves they've made, there could be maybe another move here before the deadline hits. And you have the factor of Val Nichushkin coming back. Gabe Landeskog, could he come back for the postseason? And how, in a wide open West, how that could bring everything together. Yeah, I could see the argument.
Would you want Gabe? Here's the side note on the Avs. Would you want Gabe Landeskog to make his return in the playoffs for the Avalanche? Or does that feel too like risky? If the Avs are finding their rhythm and it's working, everything's going well. Like, I mean, I know you guys have talked about it, Tiff, on your pod too, with the Avs guys. We're all for Gabe coming back, yes. But is there a timeline in which we sit there and say, I kind of don't want to push him in here too late, you know, in the season?
Well, it's a bit of now or never, right?
That's kind of where I'm at.
And the playoffs is kind of the earliest he could come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think Rudo said it yesterday. The playoffs he's not coming back regular season. That's just not happening, especially with trade deadline coming up. They need that money. They need that space. I think I'm a little more optimistic in that, like, he's been skating a lot more and he's been traveling with the team a lot more. I think he is really going to try to make a big effort. Now, my biggest fear is that he's going to step on the ice and get blown up the first play and be done. Like, that's going to be, like, absolutely heartbreaking if that happens. Now, if he makes it a whole game and for some reason, like, you know, people blame he lost the game because of his bad play, then whatever.
Yeah, but see,
and I don't think you'd put him in a position where he's set up to do that.
You're setting him in on a shootout to win or lose the game after he's never, he hasn't played in 2 years. Or even like
playing with the top 6.
Yeah, I think he's going to be on the bottom
6. And you're playing, you know, it's not the 18, 20 minutes of ice time he was getting when Gabe was, you know, the captain. And
it could go one of two ways. Either Gabe comes back and he is this shining star that players hold on to, both emotionally and physically, as this, like, we got our captain back, vibes are high. And that is what, like, when we look back on the Stanley, you know, during the Stanley Cup, championship parade, we're sitting there saying the Avs winning the Stanley Cup, stemmed from Gabe Landeskog making his triumphant return. Or it goes the opposite direction, which is what, we've kind of mentioned, where it's just like, you're just a little like, it's hard to put someone back when you're at the peak of your game and the peak of your season who hasn't stepped foot on a live skating rink, in 2 years. Like that's the challenge of it. So, but with that being said, I still think the Avs have the pieces. Now, if you look on the other side of this coin, the Nuggets,
you're leaning Avs despite being more skeptical on the Landeskog return side.
True, absolutely. And yeah, exactly. Despite that, if you look on the other side of that though, with the Nuggets, although I think, if you're comparing the moves they've made or not made to what the Avs have done, you could say that the Avs have been more calculated in their approach to free agencies, signings, tradings, all of that kind of stuff than the Nuggets have. The Nuggets are hitting their stride right now, man. They are crushing it. They're on a 6-game win streak, second place, or they're fourth place in the Central.
Third.
Thank you for that. They bumped up to second in the West is what I was saying. I was looking at the Avs. Second in the West, 6-game win streak. They're playing on a tear right now. Jokic isn't even having to touch the fourth quarter. It's interesting because I think the Nuggets are getting hot at the right time, but Harrison and I have done TDSP numerous times this year where we've been like, the vibes are high, this is a championship team, and then we've done another TDSP like 2 weeks later where you're like, holy crap, like the Nuggets need to figure it out. So I don't want to get too like wrapped up in the 6-game win streak, but it feels good going into the All-Star break.
The 6-game win streak, though, indicative of when they're playing their best, when Malone figures out his rotations, and even in this win streak, there's been no Westbrook. Peyton Watson is out. Jalen Pickett's been a key contributor. Zeke Naji is getting more playing time. The overall theme, though, is that when this team's humming, when Jamal Murray's playing well, when MPJ's playing well, they have a gear that I think there are a few teams in the NBA that would really like to see them in a 7-game series.
Yeah.
And you have this gear of like the Jamal Jokic 2-man game, Jokic going supersonic, just takes 4 games to eliminate a team, So, and the West, no one, you got the standings here pulled up. No one really scares me outside of those Thunder. And the Thunder, they're a young team. They're one of these teams that's pretty reliant on the 3-point shot. And that's, that's always a tough one, a tough variable for you.
Sure.
And I think, anything's possible in that series. And then in the East, like I think they could handle the Celtics. I think they could handle the Cavs.
I just think like with basketball or the NBA this year, the NBA feels more open to me than the NHL this season. I feel like the NHL has some like juggernauts aside from the Avs that are going to be challenging when the Avs get to the playoffs, that you're going to have to get through these guys or you're going to have to get through this team in the Stanley Cup. Yes, there are good teams in the NBA. Don't get me wrong. The Celtics are a good team. The OKC is a good team. Even the Knicks are a pretty good team. Like they have good talent, but it feels more spread out and it feels more fluctuating. And I know we're getting close to March Madness with college basketball too. And I was talking to Justin Michael, who does our CSU Rams stuff. They're in the thick of college basketball season. College basketball feels exactly the same to me right now, where there's not like one team that is just dominating every single aspect of the game. The NBA feels more wide open this year. And so I feel like that behooves the Nuggets to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And they have guys on their bench that are starting to step up when their star players aren't, or even when they are. But like Julian Strother had an incredible game just a couple days ago, former Zag like myself. So like I love seeing the bench guys getting some depth there. I think that's one of the things the Avs struggle with is like when the Avs front line is struggling, like their backups don't have as much of a gear to bail them out. The Nuggets, they've got layers of their team that can bail them out in tough games.
Yeah, and the layers is what scares you because we've seen this before, and then you get to the postseason and Michael Malone just cuts that rotation way down, and maybe doesn't trust his guys like Peyton Watson not playing a minute in that Minnesota series last year, and all of a sudden Justin Holiday, who wasn't in the rotation, getting a ton of minutes. That's more my concern than anything else. But yeah, I think what we're saying is the Nuggets have a smidge fewer variables to deal with, right? Like the Avs, there's a lot more unknowns of how will these goalies play once you get to the postseason. Will Nichushkin be back? What's Landeskog's status? Will there be another move before the deadline comes around? Well, the Nuggets, it's more like, yeah, if this version of Jamal Murray is what we're getting, if this version of Michael Porter Jr. is what we get, if Russell Westbrook can keep the two-man game and the synergy he has found with Jokic and being that really valuable six-man for them, then I think the Nuggets are the safer choice.
Sure. I like it. I've got a question I want to ask you after we hit this next break. I've asked it to almost every single person who's been on the Denver Sports Podcast with me. And since this is the first time you and I have done a show together,
love it.
I want to get your take on it. So we'll touch on that when we come back.
Nicely done.
Got to give a shout out to our friends, though, over at Breck Brew. You can see we got a Breck Brew bucket in front of us. And I can go through the list of their
Avalanche.
It's incredible. It's
a TDSP bucket.
When I moved to Denver, and I had not been exposed to the Breck Brew vibes and all of their incredible products, someone put an Avalanche Amber in front of me during the Stanley Cup run for the Colorado Avalanche, and it became the beer that was synonymous for me with the Avalanche winning the Stanley Cup. And to this day, even after the Avs won the Stanley Cup and it became baseball season and all of that stuff, Avalanche Amber is like my favorite beer. Like it's my absolute favorite amber beer across any beer. It is
really tasty.
Top of the line when it comes to good beers. But they have so many different choices. Mile High City, stuff. Nuggets, Broncos, Country Pale Ale, for obviously the Broncos, the Fun Slinger, also Broncos. And if you're not as much of a beer person, you can go with their Good Company hard seltzer. They've got good hard seltzer as well. In the summer, too, I live right down the street from the Breck Brew farmhouse. I go walking down the street, go check out their farmhouse. It's just good vibes.
Great place to eat. Such good food.
Good food. They have live music there in the summer. I could go on and on. They also have a really cool giveaway they're jumping in on right now. Breck Brew Ice Deck giveaway. 2 VIP tickets on the glass. Complimentary food and drink. March 28th versus St. Louis. That's March 28th. breckbrew.com/ice deck is where you go to enter. Tiff will also put the link in the show notes. Check that out. Breck Brew, we love them. Shout out to them for some incredible craft beer. Also got to give some love to our buddies over at Bet365 because at Bet365, we don't do ordinary. Dre already brought up Bet365. They give you great, incredible odds on teams, sports, whatever you're into. I'm big in the college basketball betting world. Love me some college hoops bets. And as we get closer and closer to March Madness, I am going to be ramping up on my college basketball bets. And the reason I like it so much now, especially, is because, like I said, there isn't like it's like the Wild West right now in college hoops. There's not like one team that's like, oh, this team's really good. I mean, CU beat UConn. Like Gonzaga's lost to like a bunch of teams. I mean, it's such a open-ended season right now for college hoops. So, college basketball is fun to bet on. NBA, obviously. Bet365 has some awesome deals as well. If you use code DNVR365 when you sign up, deposit $10, choose between either a bet and get offer by placing a bet of $5 or more, getting $150 in bonus bets, or a first bet safety net offer by placing a bet of up to $1,000. If your qualifying bet loses, you receive a matched refund in bonus bets. I know you do the betting show,
sure.
And have you had any success here these last couple weeks?
I gotta get out of football season. It's time to turn the page. I can tell you, related to our discussion from earlier, the Nuggets to win the championship plus 1,400, 14-1, really nice odds. The Avs plus 1,100, boosted at plus 1,200 at Bet365, who also happens to be an official partner of Avs and Nuggets. Love it. Check them out. Like I said, must be 21 or older and physically located in Colorado. Please gamble responsibly. You or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, back here on the Denver Sports Podcast, Christian Saez hanging with Dre here on the show. And I brought this up to a lot of my other guests, and I want to get your take on this because everyone has a different opinion. And then we'll get back into the more debated discussion.
If there is one sports team in Colorado that you could choose to win a championship within the next year, which team would you choose? Just out of personal preference. It's kind of a tough question.
Avs.
Yeah, it's really tough.
Because like
really
you want
tough.
all of them to win. Like I know that.
Yeah, no, of course. And I need to eliminate like the business side from my mind.
Sure. Yeah.
Avs.
Which one will make DNVR more money?
Exactly. Which one can I benefit from directly the most?
Right.
It's really going to come down to Broncos and Nuggets for me, my two favorite teams growing up, and kind of stayed as such. And I guess if I had to pick, I would probably go Broncos.
Sure. Nothing wrong with the nice Broncos Super Bowl.
3D chess thinking being Avs and Nuggets are way closer. If I can guarantee one, I'll guarantee the one that's further away and still hope that maybe I could get an Avs championship, a Nuggets championship in the next 3 years.
Would you go as far away as to go like Rockies and say like if you could get Avs, Nuggets, and Broncos being good,
and Rockies
and
is
the Rockies
missing one.
become a World Series team?
Rockies is the missing one.
And that's the one team that doesn't have a championship yet. I mean, I'm obviously biased. I'm the Rockies guy, so that's my team. But
I mean, that run would be magical. I mean, you can't go anything you'd say. I'd be like, yeah, I mean,
sure,
sign me right.
Yeah.
CSU hoops winning an Addy.
that would of course.
I'd be cool with that. No
Right,
problem.
right.
Like that sounds great.
Sign me up.
No, I think in the similar vein, you could make an argument for the Rockies. Yeah,
I do think from even a financial standpoint, I know it's football is different, basketball, it's all that stuff. But like Spencer and I were talking about this again. I'm a baseball guy, so I'm biased. But Colorado is a baseball town. Just a lot of people have checked out on the Rockies because the Rockies have sucked for years.
Yes.
But it's still a baseball town. I think, and you and I've had this conversation too, like baseball would own the month of October if the Rockies were in the playoffs. Like that would be a huge thing for the city and the state of Colorado, city of Denver, state of Colorado. Like it would be huge.
Fall like that in
Years. 2017, 2018, last time Rockies were in.
Yeah, and even then it wasn't the deepest run, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like ended in a week. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing like playoff baseball.
Hey, I agree with you.
There's nothing like tuning in every day and living and dying on every
October
pitch.
oh my gosh, yeah.
And there's always one game that goes to extras, and it's like the sixth relievers being brought in to get you three key outs.
And the city's like, just, I know.
Like, how are we getting through this?
The dude's a rookie too, and you're just like, oh my God.
Oh, it's just magical. I would give a lot up to get some playoff baseball back in my life. That's for sure.
It would be incredible. I'm with you on that, man. I'm with you on that. We got Simply Synthesized in the Toyota chat. CSU Cinderella March Run.
I mean, that'd be magical.
That would be magical as well. CSU's
CSU's
been a great basketball team this year, by the way.
They have been, and the streets are saying bid stealer alert. Well in effect for the Rams.
The streets are saying.
I mean, just the Buffs buzzer beater in March last year in round one was like magical.
Yeah.
We were at the bar and like everyone was going absolutely bonkers. Like, yeah, I just love Colorado sports, man.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're doing this. That's why we do what we do.
Yes.
All right, back to our topic about, which team is closest to winning a championship this year. We're talking more about the Avs and the Nuggets. But an interesting side point of this is that both teams are coming up on their All-Star break, right? You're coming up on the Four Nations, you're coming up on the All-Star break.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on this. Is the All-Star break for the Nuggets and the Avs a good thing or a bad thing?
I'd go good for the Avs, though I am a smidge concerned of the talent they are giving to this Four Nations competition.
Yep.
I just want everyone to come through that feeling good and rested and revitalized.
Yep.
Nuggets, honestly, they could have used this break like 2-3 weeks ago. Now it's kind of like, geez, just let them keep this momentum.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you on that, man. Like I like the break for the Avs, and Tiff put up our Big E's
I mean, just insane.
Injury report. Yeah.
Just insane.
If you don't know, it's McDreamy in French is what that.
I didn't know that, so I wasn't even going to try.
Dr. McRuvier Lacroix.
And he's not a doctor, but he plays one on TV. So
he does mention that.
Anyone who gets that reference, shout out to you.
But I agree. I think.
Yeah, getting healthy wouldn't hurt for sure. The Nuggets, though, maybe this hot run going into the break is exactly what they do need, because last year, so much of the theme once the season was over was they tired themselves out in the second half of the season, post All-Star break, playing the starters too much to get that 1 seed or that top 2 seed. I don't even remember how that played out. And they were just kind of spent by the time they got to the playoffs. I mean, even round 1 against the Lakers, right? They're like flat for 3 quarters, and then every single win was a fourth quarter comeback where the older Lakers kind of pooped the bed, got too tired, and then the Nuggets came storming back, but against Minnesota, it just wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And maybe this is what they need, where it's like, yes, you're hot, but look, it's okay. We're already right there in that 2 seed race. You can take it a little more easy. We're finding more depth. Jokic is getting to rest in the fourth quarters, and it's just what the doctor ordered.
I'm concerned about the streak that the Nuggets are going on, from the sense that like it all drops off for a week. I mean, they play tomorrow at 7, and then they have no basketball, game basketball until 7 days from that. I'm concerned about that from just the momentum side of things. However, with that being said, health is the overall most important thing.
Yeah.
Above streak, I mean, if the Nuggets come back and they're flat as hell coming out of the All-Star break, so be it. As long as that means that they got guys a week of rest, a week to get healthy again, that's a worthy trade-off for me.
And manage it the right way. The SoCal guys have been injured. Let Piwa and Russ get back to full health. And yeah, you're exactly right. Maybe it's a good thing.
Just the most important part. I mean, and these are, you have to remember too, this isn't football where you play 1 game, maybe 2 a week. Basketball, you're playing 3 games a week. Hockey, same thing, maybe 4 depending on the weeks, that kind of thing. So it's so much consistency that when you take that time off, you give your knees a break, you give, your back, your arms, everything, your whole body just takes off. Same thing with baseball. You just eventually, your body needs to give it a few days. I do think it's going to be interesting to see how the Avs handle having some guys playing in the 4 nations. Who are the guys that are going, by the way?
So we have McKinnon.
Obviously McKinnon.
Lekanen, Makar, Devontaeves.
So was that 4?
Yeah.
So 4
we used
guys.
To have Mikko, but
Sure. So 4 guys, I don't know. I'm not that worried about that. I know that there's always this idea of you're worried these guys are going to go out there and they're not going to get the rest that they need. They're, God forbid, get hurt, something like that. But look, it's good for the exposure. It's just part of the game. It's like guys playing in the home run derby or whatever. That's just the way it goes. So I'm not too worried about that. I just think overall it's good for both of these teams to get rest. These teams can win. These guys have what it takes.
That's the thing. Once you've had that championship under your belt, it's all a little different. Whole being with your peers, and it's all just just get through this week, get the rest they need, get the depth taken care of, and then come back and you'll be fine. These guys know what they're doing. They're not the young teams they were, a couple years ago, a handful of years ago.
Totally. Well, let's change gears. I want to go a layer deeper into this. And I want to ask the question, which Colorado team is closest to being considered a dynasty? Out of all of the Colorado sports teams, which one is closest to being considered a dynasty? We're going to ask that question and answer it when we come back.
Let's go.
All right. Got to give a shout out, though, to some events that we have coming up. February 28th. What is that? 3 weeks away? Not that far away. At 5 o'clock p.m., it is what is considered a top shelf event. It is the DNVR Avalanche Suite Takeover versus the Minnesota Wild. I see we have some Avs fans hanging out in the Toyota chat. We always appreciate you guys hanging with us, and this is one of the biggest things and events that we have all year for you guys. It's one of the events that I like to always say, it's almost like a way that like the fans can give back to us and we can give back to the fans, because like the relationship part of things is so fun. It's cool to talk through a TV, to talk through a computer, to talk through, your phone to you guys and to see you guys commenting. But it's also really cool to be able to meet you guys in person. I know the Avs guys are going to be there. Tiff, are you going to be at this, or are you going to be doing producing stuff?
Rudo's going to try to make me go. So he's going to try to make me go, but we'll see.
You're going to get to meet all the different Avs people and just get to hang out, have a good time, watch some incredible hockey. It's just such a blast.
It's a big
Food.
game.
It's a huge game. Like it's going to be great. So check that out. Head over to thednvr.com/events. You can also scan the QR code that is on your screen as of right now. Find more information about that. We've got some incredible events and takeovers coming up. We've got golf tournaments that we're starting to prepare for. Nuggets takeovers,
watch parties at the bar left and right.
Oh, it's going to be a good time. But that is the big one. Head over to thednvr.com/events to check that out. Also want to share our deepest appreciation and give you guys some updates on our friends over at Empire Today. They are one of our favorite sponsors across all of our markets because they've done incredible work across all of our markets, all of our floors. Every single studio that we have across DLLS, CHGO, PHOI, and then of course here at DNVR. The Empire Today, they've been the ones that have replaced the floors. They've got them looking nice and clean and organized, and they've been incredible to work with. So if you're in the market to replace a floor in your house, maybe in your business, wherever you spend your time, Empire Today, you got to check them out. They are the best place to go for your new flooring, because of their quality, service, and speed. Another really cool thing about them, they've got this virtual floor designer, which you take a picture of your living space, you can actually see what that new floor design looks like. The wives love that. I know Marissa, when we're looking to get our floors replaced, she can take a picture and be like, nope, Christian, that's a terrible idea. I hate the color of that floor.
Good call.
But this one looks a lot better. So husbands out there, be sure to take advantage of that virtual floor designer through Empire Today. Schedule a free in-home estimate. All listeners of this show can receive a $350 off discount when you use promo code DNVR. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/DNVR for details. Nice. All right, back here on the Denver Sports Podcast. And I asked the question before the break. Which Colorado sports team is closest to being considered a dynasty? Now, before I let you respond, I'll give a definition of dynasty, just to get that out there.
Okay.
The definition that I found, the most common definition I found online, a sports dynasty is a team or athlete that dominates their sport for a very long time. With that in mind, which Colorado sports team would you consider closest to being considered a dynasty?
I mean, terrible definition.
It's terrible. That's
awful.
So
definition.
open-ended.
Yeah.
So open-ended.
Yeah, no. I mean, because Jokic could be having a personal dynasty.
Jokic is a
McKinnon
dynasty.
could be in the midst of a personal dynasty. Cale Makar, just look at the accolades he has thus far. So to me, a dynasty is multiple championships over the course of several years and to the point of being the defining team of that era, of that time period.
Okay, I like that.
In that sport. And I think both Avalanche and Nuggets could be right there. I think the Nuggets maybe have a chance to be closer. There also would be a little more continuity with that dynasty. If they won back-to-back championships this season and next, all of a sudden it's 3 and 4 years, you could start having that dynasty conversation.
Yeah, I like that.
Avs, maybe there's a little more ground to be made up because we are farther removed from the last 2023 chip. And also Avs, they're trying to build a new core and a new championship window, but I think we're in a bit of a transition. Well, I think the Nuggets might have a little more juice. And as frustrating as the way Calvin Booth has managed this roster for the Nuggets has been for many in the Nuggets world, his wanting to build through the draft, through youth, very reminiscent of how NFL teams would rebuild. It's exactly what the Chiefs did when they traded away Tyreek Hill and then reinvested in the draft and young guys and built up that defense. And that's obviously paid dividends for the 2 championships they just came off of before their loss on Sunday. I think the Nuggets are slightly better set up to be a dynasty.
Yeah. Out of those two, I think so too. I think the Nuggets, for me, the lack of history, as you had mentioned, the lack of like history of championships, it makes it hard for me to put them on the same category as like, the Bulls or something like that. A team that's history just goes back for as deep as it was. The Warriors, obviously a dynasty in the era that we are just now coming out of. I think I'm going to go a little off the rails on this one. I think if you're talking all Colorado sports teams, DU hockey has to be the biggest dynasty of all of the teams. And I know we're going college here, but like, they've won the most all-time NCAA National Hockey Championships with 10. They've been there 15 times, or 15 regular season conference championships, I should say. 10 national championships stemming back to 1958. Like, that's a historic run. 14 conference playoff championships, like DU.
2 championships the last 3 years.
2 championships the last 3 years. Like, it's still going. Like, that's not to turn this into a DU hockey podcast, but like they are by definition the biggest dynasty across all of the Colorado sports teams here in Colorado.
You're defining dynasty as more of a holistic.
I am. I'm going big umbrella picture.
Historical dynasty. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue.
Yeah.
What's really impressive about DU is being able to do it with multiple head coaches. Jim Montgomery getting poached.
Well, and college is so changing too. Like, it's such a changing landscape.
No, and those tournaments. I mean, the Frozen Four we were talking about. Someone in the chat was talking about the variance with like the NHL playoffs. The Frozen Four always seems to be wacky. Even the conference tournaments are always wacky. They are ranked 6th right now with a 27-1 record. I mean, if they could repeat this year, then they are already to be considered a near dynasty. I also think if they build the right way, the Broncos have some upside to set themselves up to be a dynasty when you have a rookie quarterback performing as well as Bo Nix did in his rookie season. And then the advantages of having your quarterback under a rookie contract for the next 3 years, plus that 5th-year renewal, sets them up to do that. I am worried. Will they do what Sean Payton was doing in New Orleans and kind of do some cap finagling and go more vet heavy? Or will they do, brick by brick, building it up through youth, and then you really are set up to become a dynasty? But that is very hypothetical. I also think what Coach Prime is doing in Colorado in this new Big 12 could really set themselves up
Totally.
be a beast in that conference. The fact that they have this new quarterback who's
Juju
Lewis, rated by some as the top high school quarterback coming out. What could that do for you in the next 3 years? What could him becoming a superstar? Like, if he were to win a Heisman, then you're really talking about a team that has some juice and has some real staying power for a long time.
It's interesting. So you look at dynasties very, kind of in a more refined bubble of like, what does it look like over this era of sports that we're in? And I tend to look at it more filtered through a longer form, the history of the team and how that's kind of progressed throughout the years. And obviously teams go through ups and downs. Like Patriots were a huge dynasty and then kind of dropped off and came back and, all of that kind of thing. But if I put the Broncos even through the lens of my definition of a dynasty, the Broncos made it to 8 Super Bowls. They've won 3. Now, granted, some could make the argument that like you don't consider someone a team a dynasty unless you're winning championships. Just getting to the championship doesn't qualify you to be considered a championship. But I was talking to Hank about this on TDSP last week about how like I think a lot of people sometimes forget because of the lull that the Broncos have been in over the last decade. That the Broncos were a dynasty for years. You were 1998, 1999, and you went to 8 Super Bowls, throughout the span of that 20 plus years. Obviously, you won that in 2016. You went to the Super Bowl in 2015. Was that what it was? So like you could put the Broncos in that category for sure from a history standpoint.
Well,
it's
and
more of what they continue to do.
once Pat Bullen took over in the mid '80s, they never had 2 consecutive losing seasons.
Yeah.
Until like post Super Bowl 50. Until this stretch they were just in. So yeah, I mean the Broncos are one of the great franchises in NFL history, especially the last 40 years. There's just no argument. Dynasty, though, to me, that's truly only a term we throw out for those teams that are so dominant, that really are able to rack up multiple championships. Like, the Yankees under, the Jeter Yankees and everything. That's a dynasty. That's three-peating and all that. But what they've done, the last 15 years has nothing to do with a dynasty.
Totally. It's just there's so many.
The Dodgers are the dynasty.
Yeah, the Dodgers are the dynasty. I think it's also interesting, just like I talked about my definition here. It talks about how like a dynasty can be considered an athlete, and I look at like also the international aspect of dynasties and like the fan base and how that extends. Dodgers, for example, because you use that. Like the Dodgers are a dynasty, not just because they are a good baseball team, but also because they're known across the entire international stage, the national stage. People, you see a Yankees logo, you see a Dodgers logo, you see a Lakers logo, a Chicago Bulls logo.
Bulls, yeah, for sure.
And you know exactly what that means. The Chicago Bulls logo means Michael Jordan, whether he's connected to that team remotely or not.
Yeah.
So does Jokic have, I think that Jokic would probably be the closest I could go to like that dynasty player with a dynasty team. Does he have enough to kind of be synonymous long term? If we're talking, 20 years down the road nationally with the Nuggets. If you see a Nuggets logo, you think of Nikola Jokic.
1,000%.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, you'd see green 33 jerseys, and you knew that was a Larry Bird Celtics jersey. No matter where I was in the world, you knew what that was. As a kid, a little punk kid, I wore my Dropkick Murphys shirt, and that had a 33 on the back, right? It is synonymous, and Nuggets number 15 jerseys will be the same
Forever.
for as long as I'm alive.
Yeah.
Same as like a Nowitzki Mavs 41. It's just one of those Broncos number 7 jersey that you might see a kid rocking in any neighborhood across the U.S.
Ichiro 51 for the Mariners.
100%.
Ken Griffey Jr. Yeah.
It is synonymous with this super unique player. And I mean, hopefully they never screw this up. Stuff like the Luka trade will shake you to your bones. But
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hopefully he plays his entire career here and has many more years like he has right now. I think he's far from done raising his level and being the best player in the world. So yeah, I mean, if he can replicate this 4 or 5 year stretch, if you could double it, I mean, you really are talking about one of the guys who, when I talk to our people in other markets, they're starting to talk about like, I think I have Jokic in my top 10 all time,
Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy.
And I mean, even modern centers, right? It's hard. The NBA's greatest list, there's the Russells, the Jerry West, the Wilt Chamberlains, it's hard to really account for those guys who played in the early NBA years, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Robertson. As far as modern NBA players, let's say post Magic and Bird, post 80s, he's right there as one of the greatest centers of all time already.
Totally. I know. And I mean, I know the Nuggets guys have talked about this. We've talked about this. Like, it's one of those things that like you almost don't know you have how good you have it until it's gone. It's one of those things that, look 15 years from now, are we going to look back and be like, oh my God, give me the Jokic era back again? Like
1,000%.
it was just so incredible.
It
so
happens
unique.
to me anytime he's injured or not playing, It's like
the fourth quarter of every game. You're like, where's Jokic? Yeah.
This was Nuggets basketball when we didn't have Jokic. Like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like dark times.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting because the other side of it too is like how long it took for Nikola Jokic to for the Denver Nuggets to find their Nikola Jokic? Because I've talked to Harrison about, the dark days of the Nuggets, and you had to go through hell. You had to go through what the Rockies are going through right now, and what changed and how that's progressed. And then you find a needle in a haystack with Nikola Jokic, and now we're having a conversation of are the Nuggets a dynasty across the NBA right now? Can you consider them a dynasty if they win another championship? You're having that conversation. It's just important to acknowledge how long it took to get to that point, that moment to begin with, but also just how unique that is. So many other teams don't have that. So many other good teams don't even have that version of that. So, it's crazy.
In the NBA, it's so hard because it's one guy,
and then Dallas goes and trades there.
Yeah. And I mean, and they're like once in a lifetime. When you find that guy, he's truly a once in a lifetime guy.
Yeah.
I grew up, I never thought I'd see a Nuggets championship. I would think about it and it almost bring me to tears because of how much I love that team and how sad it would make me to feel like this stupid league isn't set up to where markets and franchises like Denver and like the Nuggets could ever experience a championship. And then living through that was absolutely surreal. And I'm very aware that it's pretty unlikely that even forget finding another Jokic, another top 10 great all time in the NBA, but finding even another franchise player that's so good he could actually take your team to a championship. Those guys are so rare, man.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me wrong, man.
They're absolute unicorns.
I'm feeling it.
Damn near impossible to find.
And I'm feeling it right now with the Rockies in the NL West. It's how will they ever compete? So I want to ask the question.
But what's crazy is the Rockies have often had the one guy, and they just needed quite a bit more than just the one guy. Now they don't even have the one, which is
baseball is just it's a unique sport
different era. And there's the whole pitching madness that has to be figured out.
I got to ask the question though after this last break. Is McKinnon the guy, the Jokic, in the history of the Avs for the Colorado Avalanche, or is there someone else, a name that's more well-known? We'll ask that in just a moment. Okay. Welcome back here on the Denver Sports Podcast. And I'll, like I said, follow up with this question. We talk about Jokic being the guy, and I know he's on a level of his own. He's the greatest in the world. You could put him in a top 10 all time. But you could put McKinnon in a lot of those lists all time as well for hockey and for the NHL, for the Avs, of course. Is Nathan McKinnon, and I know he is synonymous with the Avs now, currently, but if you look at the history of the Avs, and if someone sees a Colorado Avalanche jersey, who's been alive for the duration of the Avs just existence, do people go to McKinnon more than they go to like a Sakic or stuff?
No, Sakic right now. It's when we did our top 25 greatest athletes in Denver sports history.
It's got to be Sakic.
There was a very clear Mount Rushmore to start, and they're the originators of the franchise. Mm-hmm. They are the guys who set the standard, and you can't come off that standard. Elway obviously is one. Sure. Jokic has become that for the Nuggets, but Sakic is very much that for the Avs. And as great as McKinnon is, I think what Joe did, first off in titles, because he does still have one up on Mac.
True.
And just I even remember watching the Olympics in the early 2000s. There was a moment where Joe was the guy on that Team Canada team that won the gold, and he was the most clutch in the playoffs. There was no one with a better shot than
Jokic
him.
with Team Serbia. Yeah.
He's just another level. And I think Patrick Waugh, Forsberg, even Makar you could all make a strong argument that they maybe are higher on your list of all-time great Avs than Mac. Sakic is kind of the one we don't have an argument.
Yeah, you talk about dynasty players. Jokic being the dynasty player for the Nuggets. Elway being the dynasty player for the Broncos. Sakic being the dynasty player for the Avs. Who's the dynasty player for the Rockies? Is it Larry or is it Todd?
Well, we had a heated debate about this one.
Really?
We had a heated debate. And I think I'm in the minority, but my voice prevailed. And we did, in fact, controversially have Larry Walker ranked higher.
So I'm with you on that, actually.
I'm a big peak over longevity guy when it comes to all-time greats. It's in part because Terrell Davis was one of my favorite players growing up, so I won't hear an argument against Terrell Davis. There's other athletes in my Italian fandom that have a similar arc. Not to mention, I mean, my father got sick very early in life, so I think about him when I talk about peak over longevity as well.
Sure.
And I just think they both have like an elite 4-year stretch, Todd and Larry. When you put them head to head statistically, I think Larry has the slight edge. Mm-hmm. Larry also got the hardware with the MVP trophy. Mm-hmm. Larry also was a true 5-tooler doing it in center field or in the outfield, which, you know, with all, and again, I try to always make these arguments without cutting anyone down, but simply boosting up the person I favor. I think that outfield position's harder to play. Now, Todd was
agree with you.
insane at first base, like one of the greatest
outfield's
defensive
harder
first basemen of all time. But it is still first base versus
100%.
And you know, I mean, Larry's arm was an absolute rocket.
Yeah. I see shades of Brent Doyle in him, actually, a little bit. Like, you know, there's differences
Got a way
for
to
sure.
go.
Got a lot. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm like I watch Brent Doyle play, and I'm like, there's moments where it's just like he's the 5-tool player that we're talking about. He needs to get his bat around, but different story.
So based on that, I give Larry the edge. But I think to most, Helton is like that fourth Mount Rushmore guy.
Yeah. Well, and Helton, I think it's because Helton, you know, there's those iconic images of him, you know, in the World Series or going to the World Series.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like that's so much more associated with like the peak of the Colorado Rockies.
Well, there's just a generation of kids who went to Coors to see Todd play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Larry's stretch is much shorter.
Yeah, I mean, he was just inducted into the Hall of Fame last year, and he was at Coors Field. And I mean, it's Larry Walker's well known, but Todd Helton is, I think, the everyday fans. If you think of the Colorado Rockies, you think of Todd Helton.
Right. He's more synonymous with the franchise.
Maybe the true ball knowers, you're right. Like if we really did sit down and have this debate, you could probably, like you're right, you could probably push more towards Larry from a stat standpoint. But like the average fan, you know, even myself growing up in Seattle and not watching a lot of
100%.
Rockies baseball, like when I was a kid, like I knew Todd Helton. I knew of
100%.
Todd Helton, you know, and so like that was the difference. But
I mean, in some ways, you grew up a Mariners fan. It's not that different from Ken Griffey Jr. versus Ichiro, right?
Totally. And it's definitely Ken Griffey Jr. because he changed baseball as it was. I mean, it was just like he was, I make the argument that like he was kind of the Michael Jordan style of like baseball at the time. Like, you know, you could go back and, you know, go even further back to like Jackie Robinson and that kind of stuff. But like Ken Griffey Jr. like made baseball cool. Like that was why he was so impressive. Ichiro was just a freak athlete, and he also made baseball really cool, but he was just such a freak athlete that it was like you just, you know, the one person who voted against Ichiro to get into the Hall of Fame was just, you know, like that person.
Unanimous is tough.
Unanimous is tough. Well, speaking of dynasties, I heard this tossed out, and I don't know if we're jumping the gun here on this. I heard this statement tossed out right after the Chiefs got just walloped in the Super Bowl. Is the Chiefs dynasty over? Because I literally heard it was on ESPN. They were like, we just witnessed the end of the Chiefs dynasty. And I'm like, okay, well, Broncos play in the same division as the Chiefs. And we're talking on the DNVR Broncos podcast that happened right before this. We're talking about the Broncos catching up to the Chiefs. Are we going as far as to say the Chiefs dynasty is done?
No, I think that's grossly premature. Now, they didn't play great this season. But they didn't play great, losing only one game all year.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Just running through the AFC.
And you have your franchise, your dynasty quarterback, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Now, I do think there are some pieces that they're going to need to add. They're going to need to figure out. They obviously need an offensive line or a defensive line that can help.
An offensive line for sure. I mean, that was really rough. And I mean, that Mahomes this season looked pretty pedestrian at times.
For his standards.
And I mean, that Super Bowl is by far the worst game I've ever seen him play.
Although his 65-yard pass at the end
was not
might
bad.
be the greatest pass I've ever seen in the Super Bowl.
That was not bad.
Like, I watched that. I'm like just laughing to myself. Like, you took that long to throw that? Like, what are you doing, man?
It was insane.
Yeah.
Thank God the over was already, or the under was already long gone by then, or I would have had a freak out. I think that's premature.
Yeah, I agree.
I would love to be here and say, oh, yes, no doubt. Now, they're going to have to change the core of that team. I think in some ways, the core that's been to 5 Super Bowls, that's won 3, that had a chance to three-peat this season, in some ways, they're probably moving on. Like, I don't know how much longer Kelsey's going to be there. We'll see about Chris Jones. Obviously, the offensive line's already gone through massive changes. They're going to have to find a new identity, some new core pieces to kind of start the Dynasty 2.0 like the Patriots did. Like those first 3 Super Bowls that Brady and the Pats have, way different from the teams that were winning later on in New England. And I think a similar readaptation will have to occur.
Yeah, I think one of the funniest things that came out of the Super Bowl for me was the fact that the NFL came to an agreement with Pat Riley to get the copyright of 3P, and it just got steamrolled. That was truly incredible. We got a Nuggets game coming up here. Is it tonight or tomorrow? I think it's tomorrow, right? What's up, Cedric, in the chat there?
What up, Cedric?
Yeah, Nuggets got one more game before they head into the All-Star break. Their 7-day downtime. Avs got some time too. When is the Four Nations, Tiff?
Tomorrow.
Starts tomorrow.
We're previewing it today.
Okay, so the Avs are hanging out there. Are you guys gonna
USA
be
all the way
doing a bunch of stuff for that?
I think we'll do a couple watch-alongs. Obviously, we'll be live Monday through Friday. This week, next week, so we'll break down the games as they happen. But I don't think we'll do like full blown stuff.
Well,
but maybe a couple watch-alongs.
Prayers up to the Avs guys that they stay healthy and can come back to Colorado in one whole piece. We're feeling good about that.
Did you guys see EJ's hanging out in Denver for the break?
No, I
Isn't
didn't.
that beautiful?
Yeah,
I
beautiful.
love when I see athletes that leave Colorado teams, Von Miller, EJ, and Peyton Manning, and they're always just like, God, I love Colorado.
Eric Lacroix will tell you all the time, people love it here.
It's so, and I think people people who aren't from Denver, aren't from Colorado, or don't go to Colorado very often, underestimate it. And or you come in a time like this out if you step outside where you're like, this freaking sucks. It's miserable outside right now. But when you come in the summer, or just you come and you experience the sports,
or like last week when it was 60 and sunny in like early February,
and you see what a Nuggets game looks like, and
is
what
my calendar wrong?
Yeah,
what's going on right now?
Bill, did you lie to me?
I love that. I love that.
It's the most beautiful place. It's such a great community, and I think it's the right balance for athletes. They feel the love, but they're not.
It's not LA.
It's not like consuming to where it's like overbearing, It's
not Philly.
It's a great place to raise your kids. I mean, I see it with Jarrell Casey, who was doing pre and post game shows with Noshawn Moreno and Todd Davis for us on the Broncos side. Jarrell was a star at USC, Southern Cal. Who wouldn't want to live in Southern California as a former Trojan star?
Taxes are rough, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. Star in Tennessee. Nashville is beautiful. Tennessee Titans, all-pro player. But he lives in Denver. He was only with the Broncos a couple seasons, but that's like where he made his life and where he's living right now and raising his kids and everything. And you can just tell how much he loves it, how much he enjoys it.
Just credit DNVR. He's just hanging out here just to hang out with us and the DNVR Broncos guys.
I wish. It's our beautiful state. I give all credit to our beautiful state and city.
Yes. We are very lucky to be here. Thank you guys so much. We're wrapping things up here on the show. Shout out to Andre for coming on and
thank you, man,
and talking a little ball with me.
This was awesome. How far are we from being able to talk Rockies championship?
To championship?
26, 28,
Championship.
30?
Let's give it like three or 4 years,
'Kay.
and that's generous.
Okay, 28.
Playoffs, maybe 2 years. That's also
'Kay.
generous.
Okay, 27.
But
yeah, that keeps being moved on me.
it keeps being moved on me
Keeps
too.
it- yeah.
I'm trying to be generous. You can roast me in the chat for that all you want. Rocky's still got a ways to go. But
We love
Nuggets and Avs, championship window. Here we are. We love talking about it. Thank you guys for hanging out in the Toyota chat. Shout out to Tiff for pressing the buttons. We'll see you guys next time on the Denver Sports Podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.